Donna Schwartz here from the Everything Saxophone Podcast, and today my special guest is Jimmy Farace. He's based in Chicago. He's a baritone saxophone player. He's also an educator as well, and you're going to be very impressed when you hear his sound. Now, this is for the video part, but also for those that watch the video, you've got to check out the audio podcast because I always feature the artist's music in the background during the introduction and the outro. All right, so you're going to get a chance to hear Jimmy's new album, Hours Fly and Flowers Die. All right, so definitely check that out. But without further ado, let me speak to Jimmy right here. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Donna. Thank you so much for having me.
It's awesome to have you here. And what I'd like to know, I'd like for people to get to know who you are. So how did you get started in music?
Yeah, of course. So I actually started through band, like a lot of wind players, but I started a little bit late. I started in seventh grade. Everyone else had been playing for maybe 2 or 3 years before that. And as is very often happens, and I think unfortunately happens, they take the worst kid in the band and they put them on the baritone saxophone. They're like, let's give you that big one over there.
Or the tuba.
Or the tuba, right. One of those auxiliary instruments that they just need somebody on. So that was me. They pushed me over and I loved it. I fell in love with it. I practiced like crazy. Even from middle school, I was practicing several hours a day. And, you know, that hard work and diligence paid off and I got pretty good. And they were like, great, time to switch you to tenor. And I was like, no way. This is my voice. I'm not giving this up. So that's how I started in music, but also it had a very early and I think unusual start with the baritone saxophone. And part of that had to do with being pushed over to playing that. The other part has to do with my grandpa was a huge jazz fan, had a huge vinyl collection, and showed me a lot of Jerry Mulligan, especially when I first started playing baritone, and I just fell in love with the sound.
Yeah, I mean, it's Jerry Mulligan, right? So
yes.
How interesting is that? And you know, the funny thing in New York, yeah, they would push them definitely to the tuba because sometimes they didn't have a bari sax. But
yeah, right.
You know, because it's you know, in some ways it's a lot more intricate to take care of. But what's really interesting too is that, you know, you loved it so much and you probably shocked your teachers how much you practiced it and you did really well. So talk to me then, you're going through middle school, high school. When did you know you wanted to be involved with music?
So I knew pretty early on, I was very lucky to be a part of a really good music program through middle school and high school. I think of my graduating class, there was like 15 of us who are now professional musicians,
Wow.
which to me is a huge number. And so I grew up being surrounded by like-minded musicians who were very dedicated, who practiced. We'd have jam sessions in my basement. You know, we'd look up to the older kids who would teach us tunes from a pretty early age. I'm talking like, you know, freshman and sophomore year. So when it came time to start thinking about college, for me, it was like, of course I'm going into music. This is what I'm doing. This is what all my friends are doing. And I'm lucky to still get to play with a lot of them too here in Chicago, which is wonderful. And then after that, I went to the great Indiana University, Jacobs School of Music for my undergrad.
Okay, so I'm going to backtrack a little bit.
Oh yeah, sure.
But first I have to say this, that's so great that you had that kind of experience and just being around peers, right? You are the product of the 5 people you hang around the most with, right?
Oh yeah.
That definitely had an effect right then and there. And that's unusual because most people don't have that. They don't have the ability to start to learn standards or tunes in, you know, junior high and high school. That's right. Really cool. I'm really jealous actually as you said that. But
yeah.
What was there anybody in high school or were you studying with anybody that really was an influence to you at that time?
Yeah, so I was studying with Mark Colby, who's a fantastic Chicago saxophone player who unfortunately passed in 2020. But he was one of, you know, the many people who kind of cut their teeth on the road with Maynard Ferguson. And so he played in that band for a long time and moved to Chicago. And I studied with him when I was all through high school. He taught at that point in time at DePaul University and Elmhurst University, some really big institutions in the Chicago, like collegiate jazz scene. And I was one of his only high school students. It was pretty intimidating. I had to basically audition to get him to teach me. And there was only me and one other guy. And so I was really, really lucky to have him. And he was so generous with his time and his knowledge. I remember we'd often have like 2.5 hour long lessons, like be like lessons at 10. And we'd go, we'd just keep going and going and going. My parents would be outside like, when is this kid going to be done?
Wow.
So he was hugely influential on me, absolutely shaped the trajectory of my life, and just teaching me how to practice, what to practice, listening, the importance of that. So, I really have a lot. I'm very indebted to Mark, I should say. And side note about that, after he passed, I actually inherited his soprano saxophone. So
Oh,
that's really special to me to get to hang on to.
yeah. Oh my gosh, I can only imagine it. It must have been devastating for you, when he
Yeah,
passed. I can only imagine.
definitely.
Um,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. So I want to, you had mentioned, okay, so he taught you how and what to practice. Do you have any
hmm
tips that you could share for the listeners in terms of some of the stuff that you learned from Mark?
hmm Yeah, absolutely. So he broke it down. He wrote it all out in my first lesson, one big blank page of printer paper, which I actually still have, and I show some of my students because I do a lot of the same stuff with them. But he broke it down, and it was the first thing you should practice is long tones. And I've gone through several different iterations of long tones, but always starting with that. And he was very big on your sound is the most important thing. He was also one of the people who encouraged me to stick with the baritone, I should say. He was like, this is your voice, Jimmy. You just stick with it. So it was grateful to have that encouragement from him. But long tones, scales in some shape and form. So, obviously we just started with major, all 12 keys, and moved to Dorian and Mixolydian and full range and diminished, and we kept progressing from there. And then the first two things he had me practice, and I was probably 16, it was working out some sort of jazz etude or transcription, and then a tune. So for me, those four categories. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one. Fifth category is a lick, some sort of lick every week, whether that be 2/5 or major or something like that. So working through each of those, being very segmented and being very focused. The other thing he would say, which I loved, at the end of each lesson, he would say, "Call me when you're ready for the next lesson." It wasn't all just weekly, he was like, work on the material, and once you're ready, I'll give you the next lesson.
That's interesting. Okay,
It
so
was super interesting.
yeah, and that maybe that's why also the lessons were over 2 hours long or something. Um,
Yeah.
okay, because that's a lot of stuff, and so I want to do
Yeah.
some of these over here. So,
hmm
etude or transcription, right? So
Yeah.
was it something that you had to write as an etude, or was with written etudes you had to study?
Yeah. It was often written etudes I had to study. We started off with the Greg Fishman etude book,
Got it.
which is a fantastic book. I don't know if you're aware of it, but
Oh yeah.
it's all contrafacts on standards. So that was kind of two-part. It was learn the etude and also be able to improvise on the changes.
Got it.
And then as I progressed, that would sometimes be replaced with learn this Jerry Mulligan solo, learn this Sonny Rollins solo, this Pepper Adams solo, so on and so forth.
When you transcribed for yourself, and I've had Greg on the podcast.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, he's just a wealth of knowledge. And
hmm
everybody, yeah, the people that are listening right now, check saxophonepodcast.com, and Greg's episode is early on in there, for sure. So when you transcribe, did you went by ear? Did you write it down eventually? Did you just keep it in your head? Like, what did you do?
At that point in time, I did not write them down. I just got them in my head and played them memorized. Is pretty big on that. That's what was most important to Mark, was being able to play them with the recording, getting the sound right, the articulation, all that sort of stuff right. It wasn't until later on that I started writing down my transcriptions. Um, and I don't know. I've gone back and forth on how I feel about that process, but I do feel like what's helped me the most is that first stage, having the whole thing memorized and being able to play along with it perfectly. I'm a little bit sad on how many I've forgotten that I can't play back. And I wonder if I wrote them down, if I could go back, I could go back and read them and play them. But I still think what was really important was getting really playing along with the record.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, you say that you forgot them, or you maybe forgot most of them, but I'm sure like if you started to listen to some of those transcriptions, you'd get it back pretty
I
quick.
think so. Yeah, I definitely think so.
Okay. And So then the other thing would be you do a tune, but then also a lick every week. So
Uh-huh.
or lick every maybe every time or
Yeah, something like that.
got it. Okay, so when you did these licks, you learned it off of how did you learn it? Was it from a book? Was it from a record?
So we started out of it's one of the early Jamie Aebersolds. It's called 251. It's got the
Oh,
green cover with
got it.
all the stuff on it. And we wouldn't go straight through. Mark would pick and choose. And at the beginning it was just the ones that were like arpeggiating the scale and then playing the scales, just of the Dorian Leafly and then simple ones, and then going to minor. He kind of I think he chose what he wanted to add to my vocabulary, if that makes sense. Like, you need a little bit more of this, you need a little bit more of this. So we often worked out of those. And then later on in our lessons, we started adding stuff from transcriptions or just stuff he showed me. Like, this is the Crimea River lick, and this is how it fits.
Got it. Okay. And the important thing, this is how it fits. So let me talk about that. Let's talk
Hmm.
about that for a second. So you'd learn, let's say you learn the Crimea River lick. Did
Hmm.
did he talk to you about, did he have you try to incorporate that lick?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. So this would be like the third thing we would hit in our lesson. We'd do like long tone scales, the licks, and then we'd play on the Fishman etude and then the tune, whatever tune I worked on. And he would encourage me, require me actually, fit them into the tunes. Like,
Got it.
you could play them straight up when it's the 2-5-1s. Maybe the 2-5 doesn't resolve. How do you move from there? How do he was also very big on knowing the scale degrees and knowing all the theory that went around it too. So we talked a lot about that and figured that out, which I'm grateful that I started doing that from a young age.
I was going to ask you too. I was thinking to myself, I wonder if if Jimmy, if you had to have a certain amount of knowledge of that before you started studying with Mark, and I'm wondering if that was part of the audition.
I think so, and I had a pretty good understanding of theory. I always really liked theory, so from when I started playing, I was always trying to figure all that stuff out. And I had a couple teachers before him who had showed me a thing or two, and I kind of ran with that.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So blending into the lessons with Mark, it just you felt like it was like a natural progression, and you learned. How long did you study with him?
I studied with him for 3.5 years.
And then you went to Indiana.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. All right. So you actually, that's right. You probably went to Mark like one to one in person, nothing online or anything like that.
Correct. Yeah, all in person.
Got it. Okay. And so then now he was a huge, huge mentor to you. Now going
Hmm.
forward, you're at Indiana, right? And
Hmm.
from what I read from your bio, you got a full scholarship.
I did. Yes, I
That's
was very lucky.
that's great. I mean, that is really
Yeah,
hard to do.
it was. Yeah, I'm very proud of that achievement, and it was really helpful in many ways, obviously. But helping make my decision and being able to just focus on music, and it was really great.
And that's a really esteemed school. And
Yeah,
what years did you go?
I was there from 2016 to 2020.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So again, even, when I was in going to college, I mean, we all knew about Indiana University, but and
Hmm.
David Baker, I think, if I remember right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Always very, esteemed reputation, but, many years later, even more esteemed. So
Yeah.
were there any mentors that stood out to you in your college days?
Yes, I had two big ones. The first was Tom Walsh, who's the saxophone teacher and he runs the department. In many ways, I got a lot of similar things from him as I did from Mark Colby. It seemed like Mark Colby kind of planted the seed with this is, how you practice. And Tom Walsh seemed to really teach me, I don't know how to phrase it, but this is how you learn, like how to break things down, how to go slowly, how to figure out your own routine. Um, do you time how long you do each exercise? Is it you do each exercise to completion and figuring that out? He was very interested in us figuring out what works for me personally, which I loved that approach. I steal almost everything Tom Walsh taught me, and I give that to my students.
Got it.
Uh, Speaking of how to separate everything, Tom had a fantastic device that I loved and used to the same day, which was you practice the 5 T's, which is tone, technique, 12 key, transcription, tunes. And he would say sometimes there's the optional six which is etudes.
Oh, that's cool. That's really
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, it was great to break it up and start using a journal and maybe say, like, I'm going to do 30 hours of tone, 30 hours of hours. Oh my gosh, minutes. Tone, 30 minutes of technique, an hour of this, an hour of that, and figuring all that out. I do a lot of the things Tom taught me to this day. I mean, he was really great at getting me to understand the fundamentals of the saxophone, what it means to be a responsible musician, like practice, have your gear ready, show up on time, have your parts like prepared. I think about Tom's influence on me every single day.
and just, again, just the fact that you're sharing this here too and sharing it with your students as
Mm-hmm.
well is very valuable too, because
Oh,
these
absolutely.
sometimes these are the things that are not talked about, that aren't
Yes.
talked about in schools.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of those things that I think about. Yeah, and just respectful communication, like emailing back on time, getting to the lesson on time, all those little things that like help you work a lot more. So Tom was really fantastic. And then the second mentor that I had was the great Walter Smith III.
Okay.
I was there at a really lucky time, I think, because Walter only taught there for 3 years, and that was my first 3 years that I was there. Walter's influence on me was equally important as Tom's. Tom really got me together with how to learn how to, play the saxophone, right? Just the fundamentals of the saxophone. Walter, it was the first person to encourage me to think about my artistry, think about composing tunes, starting a band, how I want to present myself. He also opened the door for my, I guess, understanding and appreciation of modern jazz.
Mm.
Up until I studied with Walter, I was obsessed with Jerry Mulligan and Pepper Adams, Sonny Rollins, Charlie Parker, Coltrane, and Walter was like, "All right, all you listen to is the tradition. For this year, all you're going to listen to is modern jazz to even it out." He's like, "It's important to have all of it, have an understanding of the whole lineage." So Walter was the first person to push me to do that. And composing too. I'd always composed a little bit, but Walter almost broke down our lessons to 1 week saxophone, 1 week composition. And obviously it was all saxophone related, but he was really, really big on that. And that's become a huge part of who I am as an artist. So his influence was huge as well.
Who did he have you listening to for the modern jazz?
Oh, all sorts of people. I find this interesting now, had me focus on a lot of non-saxophone players.
Okay.
He was very interested in me having more of an awareness of rhythm sections and bands. So if I remember correctly, he gave me a list of people in our first lesson, and he said at the end of the semester we're going to do like a blindfold test and be ready.
Oh
Some
boy.
of them were like Will Vinson, Ben Wendell, I know for sure, Dana Stevens. And then I'm trying to think of all the rhythm section players he put on there, but it was like Aaron Parks, Gilad Hexelman, definitely Kendrick Scott was on the list, Eric Harland, Ben Street, I think, was on the list as well, Larry Grenadier, Linda O. I'm trying to think of a couple. There might have been a couple others, but I think that was like kind of the starting point. And then we got more into Brian Blade, Myron Waldron, and that like perceptual band, the Brian Blade Fellowship. Mark Turner. Oh, Mark Turner was a big one. Mark Turner.
How is that for you? I'm
Yeah.
curious. So you were so steeped in tradition, right?
Yeah.
Many years, not just,
Hmm.
many years. How was that? Actually, no, I have two questions for you.
Okay.
First one, were you studying with Walter and Tom at the same time?
Yes and no. So for the first 2 years at IU, I studied with Tom and then I studied with Walter. But while all of that was happening, Walter taught a class that was a part of the curriculum, which was saxophone master class, which met 1 or 2 times a week. And so it was almost like Walter was teaching us all group lessons while we were also studying with Tom, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So he was very involved in my education, even for the first 2 years. Then when I got in one-on-one lessons with him, it was more, of course.
Got it. Okay. Okay. That clarified that for me. And then what was it like for you, again, steeped in all that tradition, right? For many years for you listening
Mm-hmm.
to your heroes and now he's having you listen to music that in some respects can be totally different. What was that
Yeah.
like for you?
Well, two things. The first is it really illuminated for me the concept of lineage. Like it wasn't completely different. Like you listen to, Mark Turner and you can hear his influence. You can hear Warren Marsh in there. You can hear some Coltrane. You can hear how that goes back. Same thing with Will Vincent. I mean, all of them. Same thing with all of them. You can hear where it comes from. How it's very different aesthetically, but I don't know how to put it. Like maybe the content isn't that different. Like it's coming from the tradition. So that was really wonderful. The second thing was, it felt like it helped me be able to play with my peers at IU, like especially the upperclassmen who had maybe already been digging into that and they had like a different concept of how to play and improvise and operate as a band. And when I started listening to more modern music, it felt like all of a sudden something clicked. Like, oh, this is how I play with, these people and these rhythm sections.
What did you think? Okay, you said something clicked.
Yeah.
What did you feel may have been missing?
What I think was missing was kind of the concept of like Miles' second great quintet when you listen to them play. And there's often times when it's like, okay, maybe Wayne Shorter's the soloist, but really everyone's elevated to the same level. It's everyone's solo. They're all equally important. It's so interactive. Like you're taking, Tony played triplets, Wayne played off of that, and you go from there. Whereas, not that that wasn't happening earlier, but you listen to a lot of Jerry Mulligan and, like take the Jerry Mulligan Chet Baker quartet, for example. And it's, to my ears, the rhythm section is kind of laying like this groove that's kind of like a cloud, and they improvise over the top of it, which is very different concept. So thinking about how like the Miles stuff, or maybe the Ornette Coleman, like very more free playing, influence these modern guys, and then that seemed to make sense for me.
Got it. Okay. And then what would you say? I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but
Yeah.
what would you say influences your writing today?
A lot of stuff. I should say my favorite composer is Billy Strayhorn. I love those tunes, and so I try to keep that melodic sense present in all of my writing. Just beautiful melodies, and then on top of that, I'll say what's been highly influential on me is living in Chicago. This scene, I feel like, is very, very supportive of original music. There's so many outlets, there's so many venues, there's so many gatekeepers who want young musicians and all the way across the board, all the musicians to be playing their original music. So when I moved here and I got to be able to go out and hear Clark Summers' group, Jeff Bradfield's group, Dana Hall's group, Greg Ward, Matt Eulery, all these great people writing and playing original music, all of that like blend of ideas and getting to hear that night after night, I think has influenced me a ton.
Did you ever want to check out the New York scene?
Yeah, absolutely. So for a long time, I really wanted to move to New York, and maybe that's still in the cards. But what kind of was a turning point, I think, in my life or plans was I graduated in 2020, which was, of course, COVID and pandemic time. And I was planning on moving to New York, maybe going to grad school there. And it being 2020, that just didn't necessarily make sense. I have family in Chicago. I have a lot of friends in Chicago. So I moved here. I don't want to call it a concession, but the signs were just pointing that that was the right thing to do. And then things kind of started rolling for me. And I started, like my career started getting a little bit of momentum, and I started getting with some other mentors in this scene. And I shouldn't say I didn't realize, but I was pleasantly surprised with how supportive of young composers Chicago is. So it just has kind of made sense to stay.
It's interesting. I've interviewed, a bunch of people for the podcast. Sherelle
Hmm.
Cassidy also is around.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
she's great. She's awesome. But what I didn't realize, and no one's ever said it the way you've said it, how welcoming Chicago is to, original music and,
Yeah.
maybe young musicians. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily hear that from New York. You know what I mean? That's why I
Right.
asked that question.
Yes.
So
Hmm.
it's when you say pleasantly surprised, I can
Hmm.
understand that.
Yeah.
So, okay, so 2020, you moved to Chicago. The only problem, COVID. So what did you do
Yeah.
during that wonderful time?
So I grew up in the suburbs, so not too far away from Chicago, and I lived with my parents, and I was looking for a music teaching job, looking and looking and looking, but of course everyone was looking for music teaching jobs, so there wasn't anything happening there. So I took a job tutoring kids through like online school, which was actually really wonderful and really helped me improve my pedagogical chops, just how to teach, even though it wasn't music. And during that time, I just practiced and practiced a ton. And I decided to go to grad school while the pandemic was happening. I kind of felt like it would be a strategic move to maybe get that out of the way, get the degree while the scene is still kind of shut down, move to the city and plant my roots while I'm getting that done, and maybe get some connections and things through that. So I applied and went to DePaul University, which is right in the heart of Chicago and has a lot of, great teachers that are just stalwarts of the scene.
Okay, and so talk to me about, you mentioned teachers that are stalwarts of the scene. So who were your
Mm-hmm.
mentors there at DePaul?
The pivotal one is Dana Hall, who is the drummer on my record. Dana Hall was the head of the program, and he ran the top ensemble there. At most colleges, it's very big band oriented. At that point in time, DePaul and Dana's concept was, from my understanding, to get us ready for the current like professional scene. Whereas there's not, I'm in some, don't get me wrong, but there's not a ton of big bands, and like the big band work isn't what's paying the bills. So
Right.
the top band there was a non-ed. And the way it worked was basically like a big combo. Like we played a lot of music that was written for non-ed. There's three saxophones, three brass, and three rhythm section, give or take. And there were some rough things, but it was very open. It was very free. Everyone was blowing a lot. And it was a lot of modern music. I had a chance to write for the band and get all that stuff. So that practice was really great for me, because now what I'm doing, like tonight, I'm going to play a gig at this great club called the Hungry Brain. That's Greg Ward is leading. And it's exactly that. It's an octet of all like original and complicated modern music. So getting that practice, so I got to spend a ton of time with Dana is really what I'm saying. And Dana is just an encyclopedia of knowledge. He's one of those people who has, well, he literally has perfect pitch and a photographic memory. So he's kind of set up for success, but his level of seriousness, dedication, knowledge of everything. I mean, you can talk to him about a record and he'll know the year, the people, the place, everything, how it connects, and just being around him, seeing his seriousness, the way his thought process, it was really, really huge for me. And also the way he pushed us. I mean, he pushed us hard, and he was really pivotal on me, talking to me about like, when are you going to put out your first record? When are you going to be ready? Who are you going to do? Who are you? It was very almost a Socratic method, lots of questions, and you got to be ready to defend all your answers. So that was really helpful for me, thinking about moving forward, thinking about pushing and not resting on my, laurels or whatever I'm doing, and going.
Okay, there's a couple things here. First thing, he had perfect pitch as a drummer.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
interesting.
Super.
That's very interesting. I'm wondering, no, I'm saying that because, often wind players, right? Often wind players like, oh my God, I wish I had perfect pitch. But sometimes
Yeah.
it can be a curse too. But I'm
Yeah.
surprised he didn't play a wind instrument.
So he played a bunch of different things. I think he has an interesting path in music in his history, but at one point in time he played oboe pretty seriously, and he played trumpet as well. So
Okay.
he, I think, has been a Renaissance man his whole life, and really landed on the drums. But Dana is an amazing composer, which I think comes from, his amazing ears and deep knowledge of the theory and history and everything. But yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. And but the other thing also, the practicality of it. You mentioned the Socratic method, but it's also the practicality of it,
Hmm.
the way he approached that. And
Hmm.
I'm curious though, when did you start grad school? Because if you started during COVID, you couldn't have been, I mean, in California we were closed down, right? So
Hmm.
I don't know how closed down Chicago was. So when did you start grad school and was it closed down?
So it was a year later. So things were starting to open up. It was 2021. So
Okay.
it was starting to be in person. There was a couple periods where we moved online, of course, like a lot of people did. We were heavily masked and separated. But yeah, I started the fall of 2021 and then finished in 23.
Got it. I'm wondering, I'm just thinking off the top of my head too, that period everybody remembers being heavily
Of
masked,
course.
getting the
Uh-huh.
mask with the slits so you could play the instrument, right? And then
Yeah.
being 5 feet away from each other. But I'm
Uh-huh.
wondering if that also influenced some of the educators' decisions in terms of the types of ensembles when you think about it, because having a big band, a lot more people
Yeah.
in the room to think
Right.
about.
It is. I'm sure it did, but he had been doing that. The nonette had been a thing for as long as he had been at DePaul.
Got it.
So that might have been a happy accident.
Way of putting it. Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So, you know what was so far the theme is that you've been influenced by some serious mentors that
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
where and I'm going to say it this way, but you absorbed everything that they told you, but you became
Yes.
like their best student, right? Then you moved on to the next mentor. So,
Yes.
is it fair to say that, with every person that you considered a mentor, you followed one person, whatever they talked about, and you followed it to the best that you could until you pursued maybe the next mentor? Sometimes it couldn't happen. I get it, overlap, but is that fair
Right.
to say?
I would say so. Yeah. I've never thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right. I've always been very studious, I guess. So I like latching on and going deep and figuring these things out. But what I think is important to add about those three mentors of mine that was huge on me was their approach was not it's my way or the highway. Figure out my thought process. All three of them were very influential in teaching me how to practice for myself, learn for myself, and then for Dana, think for myself, if that makes sense. They were all very invested in me becoming, I guess, the best version of myself, not necessarily their clone.
Well, also problem solving too, because
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is every person is different. Every person's mouth is
Oh,
different.
yeah.
We're going to talk about embouchure and they
Yeah, right.
differently, right? So
Hmm.
what I really like is how, especially, yeah, yeah, especially in college, where first you were taught by Mark, like how to practice, right? And
Hmm.
that list, and then it got expanded, right, to the
Yep.
5 or 6 T's, right?
Hmm.
But within that though, how can I make it work for me?
Hmm.
That's huge because
Huge.
a lot of times people are there's everybody's methods, but people aren't encouraged to figure out a way to make it work for themselves because we are different. We do learn differently, right?
Yep.
So you've had teachers helping to guide you to do that,
Yes.
right? And then that sets you up for grad school and
Hmm.
that no net concept, which is
Yeah,
pretty different, and
definitely.
being more outside the box, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, figuring out, how you want to present yourself. Yeah, that outside the box thing.
Yeah, okay. That's cool. And do you feel so here's the thing, there's also all this talk as well. I've spoken to a lot of college educators, and we'll get into that with you in a second, but
Hmm.
with a lot of colleges, how they don't really prepare students to be in the real world, to be able to survive, to be able to know how to book gigs, what's involved with that, how to book tours, how to put an album out. Do you feel like you missed that?
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't feel like I've missed that.
Okay.
I've also had students or peers, friends my age who have gone to the same schools as me, and they're quick to complain that they missed all of that. I'm not sure if it's that it's not in the curriculum or if I just sought that out extra. I think I was very lucky when I was at IU. There was Walter, who was very, very focused on the business side. I mean, we had several master classes that were all about here's how you put together, get your good photos. Here's what you put together on your website. Think about how to use social media, your press release, all of that. Then I also had the great trumpet player, John Raymond, who was there, who built up a big career, just absolutely like grassroots bootstrapping it, like how to book your own tours, how to book your own gigs, how to figure that out. And and I had other people there as well, like the great trombone player Wayne Wallace comes to mind, who has won a bunch of Grammys for Latin jazz. So all of these people I would ask to get coffee or hang out, or after gigs, I'd pick their brain, just try to figure these things out. So I feel like I had a lot of people in Indiana and at DePaul who were very willing to share, very willing to help, like absolutely willing to help me. I've had lots of mentors being willing to make pivotal introductions or use them as a reference. So I feel like I might have just been lucky, or maybe it's just because I asked, but I had all these people really showing the way for me. And I'm really appreciative of that looking back on it.
Yeah, but you know what? Here's what I'm hearing. You became like the best student, so to speak. So
Yeah, I
you
guess.
liked being studious, right? But
Uh-huh.
you followed these teachers' concepts, the mentors' concepts, but also you sought out things.
Hmm.
You sought out classes. You had coffee with people. You
I
asked the
did.
questions, right?
Hmm.
And you took that to heart. And this goes in line with, and I had this conversation with the students that I've been teaching lately,
Hmm.
where sometimes people will grasp at all this information,
Hmm.
thinking accumulating all the information is going to make them better. It's not the accumulation, it's knowing which information you need and
Yeah.
knowing what to do with it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
And
definitely.
I think that's what you did. And
Hmm.
I don't really necessarily think it was luck. I think you made it happen
Yeah.
because yeah, because you're mentioning some of the teachers that you've had in colleges where, with bootstrapping with John Raymond, right? And
Hmm.
that's the reality
Hmm.
that people need to hear and be
Hmm.
able to embrace that and see how they could make that their own.
Yep, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, so I'm really appreciative of that.
And I would say also too, having that mindset of, yeah, having that mindset of like uh, embracing, I guess, all the influence, all the knowledge that probably has affected your writing as well, I would
Oh,
think.
yeah, definitely. For sure. Hmm.
Okay, so
Try to
then
put all that in there. Oh, yeah,
let's
go ahead.
talk postgraduate.
Okay.
So what happened? How did you get involved in education?
So I was always interested in teaching. I really liked it. I'm wondering if part of that is because my mom was a teacher, so it might just be built into me. But during grad school, my whole plan was get things rolling now. I knew that it takes time to establish a performing career and a teaching career. So I thought while I was at school, it was very important for me to get both of those two things rolling. So I started building up a studio. So that way, post grad, I had a pretty good base of private students that I ran all through myself. I'm not through a music studio. I do it all privately, which is more work, but I've always been pretty good at executive functioning skills, like scheduling and communication. So that was helpful. So it's more work, but obviously more money. And then that just kind of grew. Part of it was I got with a couple of good high schools that let me teach lessons during the day. So I taught pull-out lessons. I teach at Riverside Brookfield High School, and then both of the St. Charles high schools actually out in St. Charles. So I can go during the day and do pull-out lessons. And then I also have some students in Chicago and here and there that I've been able to teach. And then a couple years ago, I applied for and got the gig teaching at Merit School of Music, which is a fantastic, really fantastic program that's here in Chicago. They call themselves a pre-collegiate conservatory. So it's mostly kids who are going into music, like they're going to major in music. And it's had a lot of really great alumni, like the trumpet player Marquise Hill is one that comes to mind. He's from Chicago and went through that program.
Oh,
But it's completely free to students who audition into it.
wow.
So very low barrier of entry, but you obviously have to audition, and I lead the second big band there. So between all of those things that I just listed, it's been really helpful for me to just have a great base of students that I can teach on a weekly basis. That leaves me time to be able to perform in the afternoons and still keep up my shedding.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about that. So then,
Hmm.
when you're at the Merit School, is that like an after
Hmm.
school type of program or weekend type of thing?
It's a weekend thing. So what it is it's every Saturday during the school year, and
Got
these
it.
kids give up their whole Saturdays, and it's basically like my conception of it is it's like your first and second year at a music school. They have ear training, they have music theory, they have history, they have styles and analysis, they have combo, they have big band. And, I get to teach a couple of those, which is fantastic.
That's really cool. Okay.
Yeah, really cool.
And just the fact that it's free
Yep.
as long as you get in. Wow,
Hmm.
that's a game changer. That's a
Super.
game changer. And
Hmm.
I'm curious too. Okay, so you're saying it's kind of like the first 2 years of college. Have you, how long have you been there?
I've been there for 3 years now.
Okay, because I'm wondering, I'm just thinking, if they've ever thought about offering courses, some of the things that we were talking about a few minutes ago,
Hmm.
like real world
Oh,
types of
yeah.
things.
Yeah. They haven't really, they don't have that in the curriculum, but I can tell you from teaching, and especially when I have to like sub for other teachers' classes, we're all pretty on top of that and talk about those things a lot. And that's kind of the thing I think about IU and DePaul as well. Even if it wasn't in the curriculum, the teachers were talking about it. So I've had a couple times where I'm teaching, jazz history class, and it's like, hey, today we're gonna talk a little bit about history, and then we're gonna segue into whatever questions you may have for me about booking a gig, keeping a gig, promoting your gig, whatever.
The reality,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. So we've done a good bit of that, fitting it in where we can.
And the reality of it has changed in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yes, a ton. And you know what? So I just did my tour for my album release, and two of those stops were at music schools, at colleges. I taught at SUNY Fredonia, did a master class, and then at University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I think part of the reason that those professors hired me was because it's changed so much in the last couple of years. And this is right when I've kind of been figuring it out. So I had information that was very pertinent, I think, to collegiate students who are looking at their next stage of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And since you mentioned it too, I did want to get into your album release. So
Oh
let's
yeah,
talk about this. What, you've been doing a lot of gigs, uh,
yeah.
but what made you pursue putting an album out, finally getting the album out that you were
So
encouraged to do during
yeah,
school with those questions?
yes. Dana Hall was a huge, huge encourager of that. Just putting out a statement and presenting myself as an artist. Another person who I should mention, who I studied with and was very inspirational for me, was the great baritone saxophonist Brian Landris. He
Okay.
was also very big on me thinking about putting out an album. And I was looking, I do a lot of thinking about musicians who are 5, 10, 15, 20 years older than me, who have careers that I look up to and what they've done. What are the steps? And it seemed like putting yourself out there and, when you're ready and getting an album out really helps with a lot of the business side, I'll say, like just even being able to come on this podcast or have, being able to book some higher quality gigs. So that was on my mind on the business side. The other side was I had been working on this project that I was really proud of musically, which was my band with strings. And I felt like I had a really clear artistic concept and aesthetic and sound that I was really proud of and I thought was unique and I thought was musically deserving of being recorded and documented. And so that's kind of where this album came from, because I had done a couple gigs where I just wrote for strings because I love that. And it felt right, I guess. I don't know how to describe it other than that. It was just like, okay, I think I found something that is really representative of who I am as an artist. So let me try to get this out in the world.
And what is that? What is that, if you could verbalize it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's modern jazz with a string quartet. And for me, and we talked about this earlier, but the baritone saxophone is my voice. That's what I hear in my head. I play the other saxophones and flutes and clarinets, of course, just to be able to work. But the baritone saxophone sound is very important to me. And what's kind of been my concept is showcasing the beauty of the instrument. A lot of people think of the baritone saxophone and they think of honking and barking and screaming. which is a side of the baritone. But I don't think they know how warm and how beautiful and how melodic and lyric it can be. So I wanted to bring that out with this album, and this instrumentation was really important to me with the strings, because I think what the string quartet, what it really brings out is warmth and beauty and lyricism. And I think it's such a beautiful blend with the baritone saxophone, or with like my sound concept in particular. So it's a set of songs that I tried to capture that sound concept, like warmth and beauty. Obviously, there's mixture and other colors, but that's the main thing. And the the artistic concept of the record is all centered around my, I guess I'll call it my struggle, my feelings of nostalgia. I've always been a very nostalgic person. I've always disliked change. I've always felt like the present is fleeting and I'm trying to hold on. And so I've written a lot of tunes about that, and thinking about either my frustration or my sadness, or the happy side of nostalgia, looking back on the good times. And that to me just coalesced into this project, which I called Hours Fly, Flowers Die.
Okay, I'm very curious that
Yeah.
you just said you don't like change, but I can't see that, and I barely know you, but I'm just
Right.
in the short amount of time that we've been speaking, all the opportunities that you created for yourself, and okay, so you start off, you're the kid that okay, you're gonna play the bari sax, all right, fine, and then you grabbed onto that, you're
Yeah,
like
I
this is
did.
awesome, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
then you had your heroes, Jerry Mulligan, Pepper Adams. Okay,
Hmm.
and you studied them, really got engrossed into that. Older students helped you learning tunes. Then you got
Hmm.
your mentors. They slowly brought you up, and then you then they then you were told, okay, no, we got to flip this. Now you've got your heroes, you're entrenched here. We've got to listen to modern jazz, and but you did it, right?
Yeah,
So that is a change. Okay, you did
yeah.
that. Okay, and then as you're in schools, though, you're seeking out opportunities. People
Hmm.
that are afraid of change don't seek out opportunities.
I
Just
guess I shouldn't say I'm afraid of change.
okay.
Maybe I'm a little bit hypocritical, but I've always been very invested in growth, if that makes sense. And I know those two things are very similar, but and this is kind of the first track on my record is called Growing Pains.
Yes.
I've always been very invested in getting better at music, at composing, at being a person, at my relationships, and I think that comes with change. Change is inevitable. I can't really avoid it as much as I can say I don't like it, but I think I'm just very sentimental and nostalgic is probably the better way to put it, rather than I'm afraid of change.
Okay. Yeah, I think
But
so.
like moving, or leaving my friends behind in college, or those sort of things really hit me hard. And I think the more I've had life experience, the more I've been able to, adjust. Like, I'm a functioning member of society, but it is something I've thought about a lot as I'm coming from, like adolescence into young adulthood, all the things that are changing and how hard it can be, and that.
Well, adaptation is another thing though that's screaming out to me because think about it.
Yeah.
First of all, with COVID, right?
Hmm.
And how we all had to adapt. But again, it just seems like you've had to adapt throughout, you know? And I think I love the way you said you're invested in your growth.
Hmm.
Yes, absolutely. I could
Hmm.
definitely see that. And I think it's just going to get more and more. Um, that's the impression that I get. So I was really
Yeah.
surprised, but the part of the nostalgia I can understand though,
Yeah.
when you first started hearing those older masters and really
Hmm.
get and your grandfather, right?
Hmm.
The influence
Yep.
of him, I could see that. I could definitely see that. But I think just the fact that you're I don't think you are afraid of change. You know, you are
Hmm.
adapting to it, but you are reminiscent of well, that's not a great way of saying this. You appreciate the nostalgia.
I do. Yes. Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think that's very interesting, but I love the fact how you're really invested in growth and just the fact that a lot of the life lessons that you've learned, but also the musical lessons that you've learned from your mentors, how you're passing that on to the students that you're teaching, whether it's in your private studio or in the merit school as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, the impact that that's going to have. on that for sure. So let's get back though to
Mhm.
the album. So we've got the inspiration for this,
Yep.
right? And were all the pieces composed by you, all the parts of, all the parts, everything?
Yes. So I did all the compositions, all the arrangements, and I guess you could call it the orchestration because it was pretty in-depth writing for the instrumentation is baritone saxophone, guitar, piano, string quartet. So violin, viola, cello, bass, drums. Did I say guitar, piano? Yes. Um, so there's a lot of very intricate writing that I had to do. It's mostly my original compositions. I have two standards on there. The
Okay.
first is Kurt Weill's My Ship, which if you listen to it, I think on the back of the album cover it says arranged by Jimmy Farace. But if you know the lineage, you will hear it's the Gil Evans arrangement that I transcribed and reorchestrated for this instrumentation,
Got it.
which was hard because obviously it's the whole big band, and then to pare it down to
Yeah.
five or six voices was a challenge. But that's what that one is. And then I have an arrangement that I did for baritone saxophone plus string quartet. So the rhythm section sat out on this one on my favorite ballad, which is Duke Ellington's Single Petal of a Rose.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then I need to ask this question then.
Yeah.
Where did the orchestration and arranging chops come from? Was it Indiana or was it DePaul or just on your own?
Both. I did a lot of it on my own. When I started composing, I really got into arranging as well at the same time, if that makes sense. I just wanted to have more voices and more. So, like my undergrad recital, I wrote for a nonet of horn players. I'm sorry, the sun's hitting
Yeah,
me
the
right in
sun.
the eye. It just came down above there. All right, there we go. So I also had a lot of great mentors that I was able to get arranging help from. The first of which at IU was a great composer, Brent Wallerap, who you may recognize his name. He was in the Smithsonian Big Band. He played trombone, and he did a lot of the original transcriptions for Lincoln Center for those Duke Ellington charts.
Oh, okay.
So there'll be a lot of those published that you'll see, like whatever tune, A Train, transcribed by Brent Wallerap. And so he was a wealth of knowledge. And he was very strict and old school. Our assignments would have to be all handwritten. We'd write big band arrangements, and it'd be on the giant manuscript paper, everything handwritten, every part handwritten, and put in front of the band to play, which was a pain in the butt. But I'm so glad I had that experience. I
Why?
really am. It forces you to pay attention to details, for one. With Sibelius and Finale, a lot of stuff is very easy to just put in. And so then there's little like readability things or shortcuts that you can take that don't necessarily make it the easiest to read. And then also on the same note, pretty easy on, I use Sibelius to put in a chord. Like you can just plug in the MIDI, boom, play the chord, and then hit like explode to the different instruments. But in writing it, you are responsible for every note, every rhythm, where it falls, how it combines, and you can see it all and you can line it up. It forces you to slow down and be thorough, which is something that has served me very well. I think one of the most important parts about arranging is how your part looks, just the ease of playing, especially from a practicality standpoint. I didn't have much time to rehearse with this nonet. I don't think you'd be able to hear that from the record, but we did a couple live gigs and a rehearsal. But because my parts were so meticulously notated, it was great. Everyone knew where it was, where we were, everything looked the way it sounded. At least I think so, in my apparently not so humble opinion. But yeah, so Brent Wallerap was huge on that. And also, all the same stuff applies to Tom Matta, who's a great arranger who lives in Chicago and taught at DePaul. And I studied with him for, I think, a year and did composing lessons, arranging lessons, really, while I was at DePaul. And he was so generous with his time. Yeah.
It's funny because I remember the pre-finale days, and
Mm-hmm.
everything was handwritten, and how I used Finale, and of course Finale is no longer, but
Yes.
yeah, oh my gosh. And so but here's the thing, you're much younger. You grew up
Mm-hmm.
knowing only of this stuff, right? So
Yeah.
that must have been a culture shock too. Yet another thing
Yeah.
to adapt to, I must say. But sometimes though, the handwritten music is really hard to read. So you must have really good musical.
Yes. Well, it forced me to get that. And it's great in lessons now when I need to write something for a student. Like I'm not busting out Sibelius and filling it out and printing it. I take manuscript paper and I write it. And it's really helpful that I can write legibly.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I love what you said too. You're responsible for every single note.
Yeah.
It's sort of like journaling.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people who journal and, it helps to express their feelings and, thoughts and ideas. It's the same thing. It's
Hmm.
kind of interesting, that whole relationship with that. So, okay, but for your album, yes, there were two that weren't your pieces, but you did all the
Hmm.
composing and the arranging
Yes.
and yes, getting that all together. How
Mhm.
long did it take you to complete the project?
That's hard to answer because I was doing it for a long time. I started writing for strings, and none of this material really ended up on the record. But during COVID, I that was like a project. Like I said, I'm very invested in growth, so I was like, I'm gonna, learn how to do this and do some transcriptions. And I studied the scores to Bird with Strings and studied classical quartets and whatnot to get into that. And then I started writing for it. I guess I probably wrote. It took me on and off maybe a year to write all the music.
Oh,
Um,
that's not bad.
no, not bad at all. It was it's in bursts. Like I
Okay.
think the first one I wrote was Single Petal of a Rose, and one night I just started arranging, and I think I started at like 9 or 10 p.m. and all of a sudden I finished it, and I was like, it's 5 a.m. Like what did I just do? And others were bit by bit at a time. It took forever. Like growing pains for me took me a long time, and I had to keep coming back and back and prophetic dreams. But I've always been very good, I think, about giving myself deadlines. That's helped my productivity a ton. So when I started writing it, I had a gig and I was like, all right, I'm gonna book a gig in January. I'm just gonna start writing. I had a couple tunes. I wrote the tunes already, and then and I gave myself a couple months for that, maybe 3 or 4 months, and that got a lot of it done. And then I had another gig coming up, so I was like, let me write some more of it. So that was helpful for me to have those gigs as a deadline, and then pick out the recording date in advance as well.
Yeah, it definitely lights a fire under your butt when you have to.
Oh yes.
So, okay, so then that means that you book these gigs. These gigs were like testing grounds to test out the music, I'm assuming. And
Yeah, more or less.
okay, okay, because
Hmm.
I'm just thinking too, like, how often do you see a string quartet at a jazz club?
Not often.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So let's talk about this because you mentioned before
Mhm.
that you went on tour for your album. So
Yes.
you brought the musicians, you didn't like have musicians from each town, or how
Uh,
did that work?
I did a mixture. I did a bunch of
You
different things.
did.
So, yes. So, while I had a run of shows that were in Western New York that were
Mhm.
kind of centered around my residency at SUNY Fredonia. So, I played, around there. And when I was there, I played with some local musicians who I knew and were friends with, as well as while I was at the school, I did a performance that was all the music with the strings, all with the students, which was awesome. So, they had a student string quartet and a student rhythm section. And then I had a run of shows in the Midwest, I guess I'll call it. Uh, well, my Chicago show was the exact people that were on the record, whole instrumentation. And then I played Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Madison, Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati. And those I did with a quartet. So just to make it, I guess, feasible to all be in one car and the payment situation, I played the tunes. I guess we'll call it a lead sheet version, like still the arrangement more or less, but without the strings. So kind of opened it up and was more flexible and free.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Okay, did you record those?
I did. Well, not. I did. I record almost all of my gigs on my phone with my like, little like Shure speaker that I'm using right now for the podcast, and it sounds pretty good. But I mostly record those for my own uh, education, I guess, for me to go back and hear what went right, what went wrong, what can I learn from, what maybe didn't I hear in the moment, what did I hear in the moment that was great.
Okay, and the reason why I'm asking this is because you have okay, you had four people, and you were
Hmm.
traveling Midwest with the four people. So obviously, going off of a lead sheet, it's the same idea, same concepts, except you're missing certain instrumentation, right? And you're
Hmm.
opening it up. And I wonder if that led to other ideas or you know where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from. It did. And at first it was weird because at first I had the string arrangements and the string textures in my ear.
Yeah.
And I was almost like thrown the first night playing it. Like I was like, whoa, this is so different. But then when I gave into that and just started saying yes and being open, it went some interesting ways because the tunes morphed and changed. And the band that I toured with was the same guitar player but a different bass and drummer. And so the context, but then also having different people changed it a lot. And they were great musicians in their own right and had it all memorized. And so we were on tour and there's no music and we were all super open and flexible and free. So that led to some different avenues. So it was pretty cool.
Okay, I was just about to ask too, when you had the different people, did you send them the recording so that they can understand the music?
Yeah,
Okay.
I did. And they checked it out. They did their homework. And then what was important for me wasn't that they played exactly like that, but the reason I called them is because I love how they play. I was like, bring yourself to this music, and they did. And so it went in different directions, which I thought was really cool.
Would you ever consider you had different instrumentation for the stuff that was on the first album, right? Okay, so
Hmm.
the album tour, but with strings. All right, but then you had some different instrumentation. Would you ever consider putting that out as like the live version?
Huh. I hadn't thought about it. Maybe, um, maybe. What I think I've been thinking about for the next album and for next steps is continuing to move forward and keep showing more instrumentation and more showcase myself. So maybe eventually I'll put that out as the live record. But for now, I think I'm going to keep that in the vault. I've been writing new music and I've been playing a lot for Chordless Trio, which is interesting because I'm going from one extreme kind of to the other, like a large ensemble to like the smallest. Um,
Yeah,
and,
talk
and
about this. Talk about this cordless trio.
I I love cordless. I love playing cordless. And I'm not sure if it's my influence from Jerry Mulligan because obviously he's famous for his pianoless quartet, his playing with Chet Baker. I also there's a lot of trios I love. I love Sonny Rollins' trio. Mark Turner's Fly trio with Jeff Ballard and Larry Grenadier was hugely influential on me. I love that sound. I love the openness. And then from the I guess timbral context, the baritone saxophone. I think one of its big downsides is it doesn't cut. Like it doesn't cut over an ensemble.
Right.
It can be hard. Like if you ever hear a big band in the Barry stands up to play and they're
Yeah.
just kind of like covered. And it's just the tessitura of the instrument. I mean, it's similar to bass. And unless you want to play in like a very screaming, cutting way, you can get over. But I don't. I want to play soft and lyrical and beautiful. And playing cordless kind of opens that up because you also think about the range the baritone saxophone is in is right in the piano's comping range.
Right, right. So,
Yeah, it's
okay,
right
so
there.
what's your instrumentation?
So bass and drums,
Okay, got it. Bass. Now,
bass and drums.
okay, now this is interesting though, because Barry sax and bass can also conflict
They
as well.
can,
Okay,
yes, they can. But here's uh, this is something I feel strongly about with baritone saxophone. When a lot of and I'm not talking about big band here. I'm talking about soloistic playing.
okay,
My heroes, I've transcribed so many Jerry Mulligan solos. He does not play below F, like the F and the staff in his solos. That whole bottom fifth of his horn, he is not soloing with. Pepper Adams will sometimes get down there, but not really. It's a very different I don't know what it's called, range concept from alto and tenor. Where I mean, you're hearing all of those guys playing down to low B flat, but the Barry players often avoid that register, and I don't think non-baritone players realize that. So in my like study of the history of baritone and getting into it, and like you listen to Hamiet Blewett, he's way up in the altissimo, way up in the palm keys. Jerry Mulligan's up there. Gary Smellion plays all over the horn, but he privileges the upper register. Ronnie Cuber's the same way. I mean, his like you listen to even his early stuff on George Benson Cookbook, it's up high. So when I'm soloing, I'm up in that register. So I'm not really getting in the way of the bass. Really, I'm playing in the same register as tenor. And especially considering like getting into altissimo, my altissimo, what is it? My altissimo C is the same as a tenor's high F.
Right, right.
So that's not really that high. So I'm existing, I think, so when I'm soloing more in the range of a tenor than what people would consider a tenor. And then I just feel like compositionally, I also have the option to write bass lines that I can play in unison with the bass.
Okay. So you're also saying, in a sense, there are some bari players that feel that they don't want to learn altissimo. They want to, keep the lower range. But in a sense,
Yeah,
as a soloist, though, that can really inhibit you.
yeah, definitely. Definitely inhibit you. And for me, it's less about altissimo. You can make it happen without altissimo. I mean, like Gary Smulyan, I've never heard him play altissimo. Uh, Another one of my favorite baritone players is Dana Stevens. I don't know if you're hip to his bari playing. Obviously, he's known as a tenor player, but it's amazing. He also doesn't really play that much altissimo. So you can make it happen. For me, it's more about not soloing in the bottom fifth of the horn.
Well, yeah, and I think, and I
Yeah.
understand that though, because again, you're not going to be heard. That's the first thing. Although it can be very cool when you go
Yeah.
really down low there,
Super.
it really can be cool. But also I think as the player as well, as you're trying to project your ideas, there's also the subconscious thing going on where it's like I can't hear myself. I've got to play either louder or higher, and I think that's what's
Yeah.
going on too.
There's a thing there. Absolutely right. Yes.
It's interesting, and you probably get a kick out of this too. So I'm in Los Angeles and in South Pasadena, a few
Okay.
towns away from me. There's this place called the Barclay, and it was on July 5th. It was the day that there was a massive earthquake, actually,
Okay.
that happened near the Victorville area or something like that. We felt it all the way down here. It was nuts. It was crazy. But this saxophone group was playing, and now I just forgot their name. But anyway, it was two tenors, a bari, and a bass sax.
Oh wow.
No alto.
Yeah.
And was it two tenors or tenor and two baris? So it was low. You'd think it was very
Low,
low
low,
heavy,
low.
right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So the first tenor player, this guy Kyle, he can scream like nobody's business. So
Uh-huh.
and his playing is just insane. It's so good. So he didn't really need an alto player, but it was very cool to hear a bass saxophone soloing.
Oh yeah.
And you've got things to think about there too, right? Because all of your range is really like left-hand piano and
Oh
hard to
yeah.
hear,
Way down there. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was very interesting, but I think a lot of it has to do with you're fighting you're fighting the band, but you're
Mhm.
also even listening to the radio, I'll say the radio, we're used to hearing higher pitches for
Mhm.
soloists. And so you've
Yep.
got that element as well. And I think that's a part of it. But you mentioned something before I wanted to comment, and this drives me insane with big bands. When someone is soloing, I hate when the background sounds are so loud you can't hear the person soloing. I don't
Yes.
care if they're playing a recorder, like you can't hear them. And then the
Uh-huh.
poor bari sax player, I don't play bari because it's bigger than me. But anyway,
Yeah,
but
sure. Yeah.
I feel so bad for those instrumentalists because it's like I'd like to hear the soloists, please.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and arrangers for whatever reason love giving the Barry solos on the loudest blues possible.
And what's going on with that? I mean, come
I don't
on.
know. I don't know. I don't know. I love playing ballads. I wish there were more of those.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. But also, like having more dynamics in the big band so that when people are
Mhm.
soloing, how powerful would it sound for the big band doing hits really soft?
Yeah, right. Yeah. But
I
like
mean,
Count Basie, you hear that piano intensity all the time.
yeah. And I don't know why I get it, the whole big decibel rush, right? It's loud, all
Yeah,
that kind of thing, but it just makes people struggle. But when it comes
it
to
does.
soloing on the bari or any lower sounding instruments, and even certain respects with the tenor, although you can go down to B flats, I mean that's okay. Although you don't want to stay down there so
Yeah,
much,
right.
'cause, it won't cut. But I do think that that's a struggle for people,
Hmm.
And let me ask you this question. Your setup then.
Hmm.
Let's talk about your
Yep.
setup because you've got a huge sound,
Thank
right?
you.
So, yeah, no, my gosh, for sure. So, what is your setup?
Okay, so I play a Selmer super balance action horn. It's a relacker, 43,000 for those of you gear nerds out there. I really, really love this horn. And it's a low B flat, which is very important for me on baritone. Um, I think the low B flat is the way the saxophone was intended to be. The low A messes everything.
All
Uh,
right, before we get more into the setup, talk
okay.
about that. That is interesting.
So when you play a low A bari, it feels heavy and cumbersome. You play that low register and it's hard to get sounds to come out. And it kind of has like, it's either like tubby or like screaming. And it just, to me, it's never felt right. And you'll notice, and there's a reason for this, almost all, I won't say all, almost all of the great baritone saxophone players in history play the low B flat. When you play a low B flat, it feels like the difference between alto and tenor is like, oh, this is a little bit bigger. Same thing, going from tenor to bari. It feels like you're playing a big tenor. It's free blowing. It's more open. You lose that cumbersome nature. I don't know why one note and that much metal it slows you down so much, but it does. Also, in the low register, that everything tunes better. Like it just feels better on a low A. That low B flat is always so stuffy, which I hate. And especially there's so many like great Ellington and Basie charts that are written in D flat. And I think they're written in D flat for a reason. I think those composers and arrangers knew the bottom voice, because a lot of these bands didn't have bass trombone. The bottom voice is baritone saxophone, and their bottom note is concert D flat. So I can take advantage of that. All the overtones are resonant and can sing and open and full, and the rest of the band, can play off of that. I think they did that for a reason. And when you're playing those charts on a low A baritone, you play that B flat. It's not right. It just doesn't feel right to me. So, anyways, I have one, and I've been forced to play it from time to time, but I try to avoid that whenever I can.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's so interesting because when it comes to tenor, whether you have that F sharp key or not, and with like
Yep.
the Mark Sixes, most of them don't have the F sharp key. More modern
Yep.
horns have the F sharp key. It does add weight to the horn.
Yep.
Probably not as much as that low A does on a Barry, but
Yeah.
it does make a difference.
Yep.
And this is interesting. This is the first time I've heard someone say this. So I find this
Hmm.
very, very interesting where a lot of people feel like, no, I have to get the low A Barry because maybe their big band chart requires them to play the low A's, right?
People have said that to me my whole life and think that, but I'll tell you what, other instrumentalists don't know the difference. They don't know that there's a low A and low B flat. I've my whole life gotten away playing in some pretty heavy big bands, some really great big bands, taking the A up the octave, and I've been just fine. They don't know. I haven't had anybody complain. But for me, if any band leaders do, what I'm going to point to is the history of the music. Harry Carney in Duke Ellington's band played a low B flat. Count Basie's band, low B flat. Joe Temperley in Lincoln Center, low B flat. Gary Smullian in Vanguard, low B flat. I could just keep going. And all these great recordings, like especially the Thad's, like repertoire stuff, Thad stuff, Basie. I think modern editors put the low A in the part because you listen to the recording, they're not playing the low A.
Okay, for that, but modern compositions, though, more modern
Yeah,
composers will put it in.
totally. Yes, they will. They absolutely will. But to me, like I look at the modern big bands and like Jazz at Lincoln Center is paramount for me. Paul Mazzella, Joe Temperley, they're playing low B flats.
Okay.
Maybe Gordon Goodwin's big band, and I'm not exactly sure who the Barry player is, but I've uh, I've been okay. And also, oftentimes that note is in unison with the low C and the bass trombone right behind you, so it's
Oh,
happening somewhere else.
interesting.
Uh, Now, I said there's been times, so I have it. I just had a gig where I played with the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra, and it was like a Motown and Philly sound concert, and every chart had a bazillion low A's. And
Okay.
so I brought my low A. I did it. I did it. But for me, I'd rather sacrifice that one extra note and just play it up the octave and have the sound, the right sound, and the right feeling.
So let's go back to the setup then, because what I want to
Yeah,
ask you is then what's the horn that you use that has the low A?
I have a Mark Six. It's a Summer Mark Six with a low A.
Got it.
Um, it feels good. I would like to maybe eventually one day maybe find, because there's some nice low A SBAs that I've played that feel more like my main horn. So maybe I'll one day get one of those. But I also have to play a different mouthpiece on that. So I mean, if we keep going with setup, so on my low B flat, I play a Labeo mouthpiece. The model is a Rosie, and it's a 10 star. Anyone who's played Labeos know that they're amazing. They're amazing pieces, but every single one is different because he handmade them. Uh, Fred was infamous for like not measuring, just going by feel and vibe. So I've owned so many Labeos trying to find the perfect backup, and you can't. They're all different. They're all so different. So, anyways, I play a Rosie 10 star with a Silverstein ligature, and I've been playing recently Boston Sax Shop Black Label threes. Um, I've been kind of experimenting with that, but that's what I've been on for the last little bit here. And then on low A, when I play, just for those curious, the only way I've been able to get it to work is with a mouthpiece with a little bit more of a baffle. I think just to get the air moving faster to get through the horn. So on that one, I also play a Labeo, and it's the model called Mr. Stripey. That one's a 9 star. And it's almost the same thing, just with a step baffle instead of a rollover.
Big tip openings.
Yeah, I do play big tip openings, and that kind of happened by accident. I I always play pretty regular tip openings. The mouthpiece I played before this for forever was a Van Doren, just V16, mostly through college, which is just 125. But then I bought this mouthpiece from Brian Landris. He is very into gear and tweaking and all that stuff, and he plays big tip openings on all of his horns. And so he sold me this mouthpiece, which was made for him. It was one of his backups, and he needed to get rid of it for whatever reason. And I got it, and I was like, yeah, it's kind of big. It's a 140. But I played it, and I was just blown away at the flexibility. So for me, the reason I play these big openings is because it awards you a level of flexibility that the baritone doesn't normally have. I talked about what I think of like the downsides, like it doesn't cut. Another thing is it's not that flexible in terms of tone and also intonation. The
Okay.
big tip opening can be harder to play, yes, but it gives me more flexibility to make it, I think, a more melodic voice, if that makes sense.
Okay, and then are you offsetting the big tip? Well, see, here's the thing. A lot of people will offset a big tip opening with a lesser strength reed, a lower strength
Yeah,
reed, but you're not doing that. You're doing a three, which is most people are like around a 2.5 to three. So you're
yeah,
not offsetting in that way.
I'm not really. Um, and it's hard on my chops. But
Okay.
I just like the sound. I've experimented with softer reeds, and I don't get the same warmth and the same size. I think playing that setup is what gives me that sound that's different. I think my sound's different than a lot of other Barry players, and I'm sure that has something to do with it. But I do a lot of long tones. I play a ton of. I actually love playing long tones. A lot of my friends think I'm crazy for it. They hate long tones. I love them. It's like my favorite thing to practice. So long tones help. Playing with drones help. Practicing overtones help. And I've just gotten to a point where now I don't. It doesn't feel big. It doesn't feel cumbersome. It just feels like regular. Just that's just what I play.
I got to tell you, this is some great advice. You shared so much just in the short amount of time that we've been speaking, and just some really good tips, especially for Barry players, but also mindset too, because
Mm-hmm.
like I mentioned before, you're invested in your musical growth,
Yeah,
so there's but you have a healthy respect for the past,
I do.
the
Mm-hmm.
nostalgia, right?
Yes.
So you had the foundation, and then you could build from there. And
Yeah.
that's what you've done. And where can people find you online? Where can they buy the new album?
Yeah, so that you can buy the album on it's out on this record label called Shifting Paradigm, which is a fantastic record label out of Minneapolis that really I think promotes Midwest jazz, which is often overlooked because everyone thinks of New York as the Mecca. There are some of the best musicians in Chicago that I think can go toe to toe with some of the best in New York. And this record label does a great job at shining a light on that. So you can buy it. I printed vinyl, CD, and there's digital download available on their website, on their Bandcamp page. That's where you can buy the music, but you can hear the music anywhere you stream. It's on Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, all of that stuff. I do a lot of my promoting on social media. You can find me on Facebook under my own name, Jimmy Farace, or on Instagram, which is where I've been, doing most of my stuff, which is at JimmyJazz15.
Okay. And what we're going to do, everybody, at Jimmy Jazz 15, we're going to have these links in the show notes for this episode, so this way people can find it. And your website also.
Yes. Oh, I forgot. Yeah. My website is my name, JimmyFaraceMusic.com. And then Farace is spelled Farace.
And on your website, remind me, I think there should be links to also buy your CDs as well. It
Yep.
should point to.
Yeah. You can go right to my website. You can find everything. It'll bring you to my social media, to that Bandcamp. You can listen. You can watch the videos. There's even a little form thing, so you can go troll me there if you want.
No, it's awesome, and it's very important, business-wise too. Developing your own email list of followers, especially, you did one tour already, but you're going to want to do more tours, and you're going to want to have supporters in those areas. So
absolutely.
We talked a little bit about next projects, right? So the Cordless Trio, and is that like in your thoughts right now, or are you starting to come to fruition with some of this?
Yeah, absolutely in my thoughts. I think it's important to keep moving, just keep grinding, I don't want to say not give myself a chance to rest, but you have to make it happen in this career. So I have a bunch of gigs booked over the next several months, and I've been writing the music. So I'm going to start working out that repertoire. A big one coming up, I'm going to be playing at Evanston Space, which is a major venue here in the Chicagoland area, in August, end of August, with that trio, which features Dana Hall and Clark Summers, the same bass player and drummer on my record. Both of them have been huge mentors to me, so it's very important to me playing with them. And then, we'll see when that might come out, but I'm hoping it'll be sooner rather than later.
That's cool. Well, listen, Jimmy, this has been so awesome. I'm so glad that we had the time. We made the connection to meet, and people get a chance to get to know you. And I'm encouraging everybody to check out his album, listen to his sound. It is very huge, and it's also, I was thinking about it as you were talking, your sound has like a singing quality to it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's really good. So thanks again for being a guest on the Everything Saxophone podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Donna. It's been great talking with you.